So what's standing in our way is not the lack of technical solutions. It's not the lack of ideas that will help move us forward. What's holding us back right now is politics in Washington. It's a stalemate. It's a stalemate that results from the uncompromising view of this idea that the only thing we can do is go back to the same top-down economics that didn't work and got us in this mess in the first place. I mean, look, Mr. Romney and his allies in Congress, they've got a very simple set of ideas when it comes to the economy. Their basic theory is if they cut taxes more for the wealthy, and if they get rid of regulations, some of which have been on the books for decades, some of which we put in place to rein in Wall Street after this latest debacle, some of which we put in to make sure that health insurance companies aren't taken advantage of, some of which we put in place to make sure that credit card companies or financial institutions are treating consumers fairly. The notion is that somehow if we get rid of those regulations and we give more tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans, this will all lead to jobs and prosperity for everybody. Look, that is their idea. That is what they are proposing. That's where they will take us if they win. The centerpiece of Governor Romney's entire economic plan is a new $5 trillion tax cut. This is on top of the Bush tax cuts. Now, we've known for a while that a lot of this tax cut would go to the wealthiest 1% of all households. We knew that. But yesterday, an independent, nonpartisan organization, they dug into the numbers. They did the research. They analyzed Governor Romney's plan. And by the way, this is an organization that's headed by an economist who used to work for President Bush. So this is not some partisan analysis. This is a bipartisan independent analysis. So here's what they found. I want everybody to pay attention. This study found that folks making more than $3 million a year, so this is the top 1/10 of 1%, would get a tax cut worth almost $250,000. So they'd get a $250,000 tax break at least. Some folks would get more. So the question is, since Governor Romney says he doesn't want to add to the deficit, he thinks there's a moral challenge, we've got to bring down the deficit. Who gets the bill for these $250,000 tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires? There's a smart crowd. You do. This analysis found that
Barack Obama अहिले अमेरिकाको भर्जिनिया लिजबर्गमा सम्बोधन गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ र उहाँले आफ्ना प्रतिद्वन्द्वी रिपब्लिकनका रोम्नीका विरुद्ध त्यसरी खनिनु भएको छ र उहाँको ट्याक्सको विषयमा पनि बोलिरहनु भएको छ बाँकी कुरा उहाँबाट
will be hit with an average tax increase of more than $2,000. Now understand, he's not asking you to pay an extra $2,000 to reduce the deficit, or to invest in schools, or to help pay for the war, or to help look after our veterans. That's not why he's asking you to pay an extra $2,000. He's asking you to pay more so that folks like him can pay less. Just to give you some sense of this, and again, this is not my analysis. In order to afford just one $250,000 tax cut for somebody like Mr. Romney, 125 of families like yours would have to pay another $2,000 in taxes each and every year. Now, not surprisingly, his campaign was asked about this Romney middle class tax hike. And they said the study failed to take into account the massive economic boom that would come from cutting taxes on the wealthiest Americans and the biggest corporations. We saw how well that worked the last time we tried it. We know better than this. They have been trying to sell us this trickle-down tax cut fairy dust before. We've seen this before. And guess what? Every single time, it doesn't work. It didn't work then, it won't work now. It's not a plan to create jobs. It's not a plan to lower our deficit. It's not a plan to move our economy forward. We do not need more tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. We need tax cuts for working Americans. We need to keep taxes fair and low for families who are trying to raise their children and keep them healthy and send those kids to college and keep a roof over their heads. If we're going to make sacrifices, we should be making it to invest in schools and bring down our deficit. We don't need more tax cuts for companies, especially those that are shipping jobs overseas. We need tax cuts for companies that are creating jobs right here in the United States of America. And that's the choice in this election, and that's why I'm running for a second term as president. So Virginia, I've got a different plan for America. 4 years ago, I promised to cut middle-class taxes, and I kept that promise. By a total of about $3,600 for the typical family. So now, I want to keep taxes exactly where they are on the first $250,000 of everybody's income. So if your family makes under $250,000, like 98% of Americans do, you won't see your income taxes increase by a single dime next year. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be in the other 2% of America, I fall in that category, some of you do too. All we're asking is that we contribute a little bit more so that we can pay down this deficit and invest in things like education that will help us grow. And keep in mind, look, we're going to make sure government does its part because there's still waste in government. We've already made $1 trillion worth of cuts. We can do more streamlining. We can make government more efficient and more consumer friendly, but I'm not going to pay for a massive new tax cut for millionaires and billionaires by gutting investments like education and infrastructure and basic science and research and the safety net and Medicare, those things that have always kept the middle class strong. All I'm asking is that we go back, for folks like me, for the top 2%, go back to the rates we paid under Bill Clinton. And by the way, if you remember, that was when our economy created nearly 23 million new jobs, the biggest budget surplus in history, and a whole lot of millionaires to boot. That's how we grow the economy. Look, nobody's satisfied with our pace of growth. Nobody's satisfied even with all the jobs we've created. We've got to create more. But if you look at our history, if you look at the facts, every time we've grown, it hasn't been by the top down. It's been from the middle out. It's been from the bottom up. When middle class families are doing well, lo and behold, everybody does well. If that construction worker's got a little extra money in his pocket, he goes and spends it, maybe on a new car. You know, when we got new teachers doing great work with our kids, then, you know what, they go to a restaurant and spend that money. And so suddenly businesses are doing well, the economy's doing well, and we get into a virtuous cycle, and we go up. But if everybody's struggling, and all we're doing is rewarding folks who are already doing so well that they can't really spend anymore, the economy doesn't grow as fast. So Leesburg, if you believe that Governor Romney's plan will make us better off,